Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, again, heartbreak in California and across the country after another deadly mass shooting, this time in a small Bay Area community where at least 7 people were shot and killed. We'll talk to the mayor of Half Moon Bay about what we know so far. This as we learn more about the deadly mass shooting that's now killed 11 people at a Lunar New Year celebration near L.A.
It dawned on me that this was the moment to disarm him. I could do something here that could protect everybody and potentially save myself.
Ahead, we'll hear from the man who confronted the gunman, plus our exclusive video showing their struggle over the weapon. A strategy shift for the FDA in the fight against COVID. The agency now proposing once-a-year shots for most Americans. What's behind this new simplified approach and what it means for you. Swift justice. This morning, bad blood taking center stage on Capitol Hill in a Senate hearing over the now infamous Taylor Swift ticket sale fiasco. Why Ticketmaster's parent company is now saying, "Don't blame me." And adventure awaits. 2023 expected to be a big year for travel, but after a nightmare holiday season at airports, can we expect more of the same? What you need to know before you book your next trip. Glad you're with us. We're going to begin this morning with breaking news out of California, where another mass shooting has ripped apart a community.
Investigators say a gunman shot and killed at least 7 people at 2 different locations. It happened near the small city of Half Moon Bay, just south of San Francisco. Aerial video captured the moment the suspected shooter, 67-year-old Chun-Li Zhao, surrendered to authorities. Now, this tragedy came just 2 days after a Lunar New Year celebration turned into a nightmare when a separate gunman shot and killed 11 people at a dance hall in Monterey Park, California, near L.A. Multiple law enforcement sources familiar with the investigation say they believe the motive in that attack appears to be personal rather than terror or hate crime related. And now we are seeing harrowing video of a man risking his life to wrestle away a gun from the suspected shooter as he tried to walk into a second dance hall, potentially preventing even more carnage. We're going to get to more on that heroic video with NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin in just a moment. But we begin with Half Moon Bay Mayor Deborah Penrose. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. I know the last 24 hours have been incredibly difficult, and our hearts go out to your community this morning. I mean, we know these shootings happen at agricultural businesses on the outskirts of your town. Investigators say the suspect is believed to have been a worker at one of these locations. What's the very latest that you're hearing?
I don't think we've heard a whole lot more than what you already know, and that is that the victims were all agricultural workers, that the shooter was probably an agricultural worker. The victims' families have been asked to leave the scene of the crime and not allowed back in. So they are currently being cared for and placed in hotels and cared for by our social service workers.
Mayor, is it true that some families lived on site where these shootings took place? And does that mean it is possible that children may have been witnesses to what happened?
Yes, there definitely were children that were witnesses. It's horrific. It's just horrific. It happened in farmhouse, farm worker housing, and there were families there.
When you hear that detail, what goes through your mind?
I'm in shock. It's horrible. The first thing that comes to my mind is, when are we going to stop? When are we going to stop allowing people to buy guns? When are we going to ban semi-automatic weapons? How many people have to die? How many children have to be killed? How many children have to witness their parents being killed?
Your city is a coastal town, population of around 11,000. What should we know about your community right now?
Our community is pulled together, I can tell you that. All of our city has purchased needed supplies. We work with the Red Cross. We're going to be giving basic assistance tomorrow for lost wages. We'll be providing counseling and support from the faith-based leaders. In our community, we receive donations of food, blankets, snacks. We have translation services that we have provided in both Mandarin and Spanish. Food's been provided. Our Fire Protection District, our county emergency medical services have provided medical evaluation, county behavioral health and recovery services, and local nonprofits are all providing grief counseling. Our sheriffs are professional, they're hard at work, and they're going to be figuring out why it happened, why this particular incident happened. But I can tell you this, if guns weren't as available as they are, fewer of these deaths would occur.
Mayor Deborah Penrose, I know this has been a difficult past 24 hours for you and your community. We are thinking of you and appreciate you taking some time to speak with us this morning.
Of course.
In Monterey Park, this weekend's mass shooting there has claimed an 11th victim, and it comes as investigators are learning more about the attack itself. Monterey Park's mayor told NBC News the suspected 72-year-old gunman may have been targeting his ex-wife when he opened fire inside a ballroom Saturday. For more, we're joined by NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin in Monterey Park, California. Aaron, investigators say, it was terrible. Investigators say it could have been worse. Newly released video shows 26-year-old Brandon Say wrestling the gun from the suspected shooter at a second dance hall just minutes after the attack. He is just an absolute hero. What can you tell us about this terrifying encounter?
Hey, Lindsay. Well, it took 26-year-old Brandon Say just 4 minutes to wrench the gun away from that 72-year-old suspect. A harrowing encounter caught on surveillance footage that took place some 2 miles from where I'm standing now, the Star Dance Studio, where that suspect shot and killed at least 11 people. Say telling NBC's Lester Holt that he believed that the gunman intended to do harm at that second location. Take a listen.
Did he say anything during this encounter?
No, his facial expressions and eyes did most of the talking.
What did those eyes tell you?
They told me he wanted to do harm, like he was a troubled individual trying to do harm to others, make people feel the pain he was feeling.
Now the gunman's motive remains at the heart of this ongoing investigation. Multiple sources telling NBC News that they believe that the motive was personal, not related to terror or a hate crime. The mayor of Monterey Park telling NBC News that they believe he may have been targeting his ex-wife. Lindsay.
Aaron, this is such a traumatic experience for the witnesses, for the families, during what should be a time for celebration and community. What are you hearing there from people in the community?
Well, Lindsay, this is a community traumatized, not only the families and friends of the 11 lives lost over the weekend, but also the survivors. NBC's Lester Holt spoke to a survivor named Sally. She described how when the gunman walked into the studio behind me and opened fire, her dance partner shielded her and potentially saved her life, but lost his in the process. Take a listen.
When did you realize that your partner had been hit?
I realized until I have a blood on my hand.
And it wasn't yours?
It's not yours. I was so scared. I thought I got shot.
He was trying to cover you?
Yeah, he tried to cover us. We are so scared.
Now, authorities have named 3 of the 11 victims, including 63-year-old Lilan Lee, Valentino Alvaro, as well as 65-year-old Mai Nan. Mai Nan's family, her nephew, releasing a statement on her behalf that reads in part, "It's still sinking in what happened to my Mai. She spent so many years going to the dance studio in Monterey Park on weekends. It's what she loved to do. But unfairly, Saturday was her last dance. We are starting the Lunar New Year broken, as is this entire community." Lindsay.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you.
The shooting in Monterey Park happened as the community celebrated the Lunar New Year. Celebration mixed with trepidation, with hate crimes against Asian Americans on the rise. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park has reaction from members of the community.
As you can imagine, many residents here in this community say they've been shaken by this senseless attack. But for many, this felt personal because it happened during one of the most joyous times of the year.
The joy of ringing in the Lunar New Year, gripped by tragedy in Monterey Park.
Heartbroken that it happened on a day where folks are supposed to be celebrating.
Considered the first suburban Chinatown and a safe space for immigrants, the streets offer a flavor of the rich culture that exists in this predominantly Asian community. Here, traditions date back centuries, including the most important of them all.
How sacred is the Lunar New Year for the Asian community?
It's our holy day.
Very important. Yeah, every year we celebrate.
The mass shooting canceled festivities that typically attract tens of thousands of visitors for one of the largest Lunar New Year celebrations in Southern California. Other major cities, including New York, San Francisco, and Seattle, heightened security and adjusted resources for their own celebrations.
We're living in America, and every time we go out, there is that threat.
Law enforcement sources say the 72-year-old Asian gunman's motives were personal. Still, the violence brought up memories of attacks targeting Asians.
I think everyone was on edge that this was going to be another horrific hate crime against Asian Americans.
Recent data show only half of AAPIs feel safe going out, and 65% worry about the safety of family members and elders. Huang Nguyen lives and works in Monterey Park.
Do you think this shooting will change the community?
I think it has already.
Generations have leaned on the city for hope and new beginnings. Now heartbreak in the new year is bringing them even closer together.
We don't want this to be sort of what Monterey Park is known for. It's so much more than a city that's been marked by a mass shooting.
While it's still unclear if Lunar New Year celebrations will be rescheduled here in Monterey Park, we do know that the festivities in Alhambra, where the gunman entered a second dance hall, that event will be moving forward this coming Sunday as scheduled. Back to you.
All right, Kathy Park, thank you.
Let's switch gears a little bit and get a check at your morning news now weather forecast.
Yeah, meteorologist Angie Lassman joined us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. We have our next storm system that's going to bring some snow and some rain to folks across much of the eastern half of the country. So let's get to it. Here's what's going on right now. This is the area that we're watching for some continued developing. You see snow in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and a whole lot of rain spreading to the east of that. This is a couple of things that we're going to see dealing with through the next couple of days. Here's how that system develops. We're going to watch it continue its march to the north and east and eventually spread some snow to parts of the Great Lakes as well as the Northeast. Will we get some snow in New York City? Hold on. Hold that thought. I'm going to tell you about that here in a moment. But we'll also see some rain, and we have a potential for some severe storms through the day today. So here's all of those impacts kind of in one. As we zoom out, 58 million people are now under winter weather alerts. We likely will see this expand as that system continues to move through the eastern half of the country. We're also dealing with 12 million people under an enhanced or slight risk for severe storms as we go through the afternoon hours today and into the early morning hours tomorrow. This means that we could see some tornadoes, possibly, and they could likely be strong as well, EF2 or stronger. So just be aware of that if you live along that Gulf Coast there where you see that highlighted. Now, we'll also have a flash flood risk with potential for anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of snow and some gusty, or rather rain, and some gusty winds as well, 40, even close to 50 miles per hour in that same area. How about the snow? This is what, my social media, people cannot stop asking me when New York City is going to get some snow. You can see Springfield.
Lubbock is. Lubbock is getting snow.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Joe asking me, actually. Burlington, 4 to 8 inches. Joe, eventually we'll see some snow in New York City, maybe a little bit, enough to possibly keep us out of that #1 spot for the longest since we've seen the first day of snowfall in this year. Notice, no
0 inches.
0. On average, we should have 12 by now. That latest date of the first snow is January 29th. Right. Potentially tomorrow, we could see maybe some measurable snowfall in the morning hours.
All right, fingers crossed. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks. Turning now to the investigation into President Biden's handling of classified material. In a letter seen by NBC News, the White House says it is willing to cooperate with the House Oversight Committee's probe into the matter. NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now for more on this. So, Carol, this letter was in response to a request for information from committee chair Republican Congressman James Comer. What did it say?
Lindsay, it makes no commitments on the part of the White House to cooperating with the specifics of the requests that have been made by the House Oversight Committee. There's been two letters that I've sent, one on January 10th, one on January 13th. The first requested that initial information about that initial batch of documents that was found at the president's former office in Washington, D.C., followed by a letter saying, hey, we want all the information on all the documents that are out there as new revelations come to light. But the White House is saying that they are okay with cooperating if this is legitimate, and that's the key line in this statement here, Lindsay. I'll read part of it from the White House counsel's office. It says, we are reviewing your recent letters with the goal of seeking to accommodate legitimate oversight interests within the committee's jurisdiction while also respecting the separation of powers and constitutional and statutory obligations of the executive branch generally and the White House in particular. So that's a lot of legal talk to basically say, we'll consider it. We'll get back to you. There are some legal things in place here that hurdles we may not be able to get over, and also laying the groundwork for saying, hey, this is not legitimate oversight. We're not going to cooperate. And at the same time, the White House is saying, look, you don't have access to these documents. They're with the archives and the Justice Department.
So, Carol, what has the reaction been like from the GOP at large? I mean, have we seen a pretty unified response, or are we seeing some lawmakers with differing opinions?
Well, what we've seen, Lindsay, is that the House Republicans who have oversight authority, they're in control of the House, have been very aggressive on this. They've come out, they've made a number of requests, they're highly critical, they're all over television talking about this. And on the Senate side, it's been a little bit different in the sense that Democrats are in control there, and there isn't the ability for senators who may want to get involved in investigating this to actually do that. So take a listen to some of the senators who've talked about this, Republicans.
Presidents look at classified documents all the time. So here's what I would do if I were the Attorney General. I would stand up in front of God and country and the American people and say, I made an error of judgment.
I'm glad there's a special counsel, but of course that is no substitute for oversight by Congress in a public setting, which is what I hope the House is going to do. I hope the Senate will do it too, but I'm not holding my breath with the current Senate majority. But certainly I hope the House will, and I look forward to seeing what more we're doing.
Now, Lindsay, we also have Attorney General Merrick Garland weighing in yesterday. He was asked about whether the Justice Department is treating the cases of former President Donald Trump in classified documents and President Biden classified documents differently. He said, no, they're following practices and norms the Justice Department has long followed. Democrats and Republicans are treated the same, and that's what's happening in these instances.
Got to be quick with you on this, Carol, but what's the latest with this Oversight Committee chair letter to the Secret Service?
So this quickly, Lindsay, is the oversight is asking the Secret Service for records that they may have about visitors at President Biden's residences. The idea is to try to get at whether these classified documents that were found there could have been exposed to somebody, and there could be a threat to national security. Secret Service has to look at that. They don't keep visitor logs, but they do background checks on people who visit the president's residences. And so there may be some middle ground there. We just don't know.
Okay, Carol, thank you so much.
Staying in Washington, and a day of redemption for fans of Taylor Swift. Ticketmaster and its parent company Live Nation are set to be the focus of a Senate hearing expected to begin later this morning. It all stems from that massive meltdown of Ticketmaster's website back in November when tickets for Swift's Eras tour went on sale, resulting in seemingly endless wait times for tickets and millions of broken hearts.
I don't think all of those hearts have quite healed yet either. Some lawmakers say Ticketmaster has too much power. But Ticketmaster says they're not the ones to blame.
For more on this, we are joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, both noted Swifties, of course. Danny.
I think Ali's actually working in her capacity as a Taylor Swift correspondent.
I believe she is, and Danny is about to become one. You didn't know that. Ali, let's start with you here. Big picture, what can we actually expect from today's hearing?
Yeah, some Swifties are still licking their wounds over what happened with the Ticketmaster ticket debacle, but you got to imagine that those of us who remember it all too well are likely to see over the course of 2 hours this morning the head of Ticketmaster, Live Nation, their parent company, defend their reputation against what senators are going to be trying to do, which is show that they might have a little bit too much control over the ticket market. And they're also going to have other bands who are there, including one of the members of a band called Lawrence, talking about the ways that Ticketmaster is able to control the market, the way that musicians and bands are able to go on tour, which is how they make most of their money. So it's about Taylor Swift, but it's also not. You're going to see senators trying to make a lot of points about antitrust and potential monopolies. That's, of course, where Danny comes in, because there's a lot of legal implications to trying to do that. But from the perspective of what we're going to see today, it's going to be a lot about Taylor Swift, but also a lot not about Taylor Swift.
We need a ticker in the corner with all of the song references, right?
Exactly.
All right, so
I only
Danny,
got 2 or 3 in.
we got him.
you got some time before your next one. All right, so Danny, let's talk about this, because after this happened, lawmakers were very quick to essentially say, look, something needs to change. As we just heard from Allie, they say that Ticketmaster has a monopoly on ticket sales. Is that accurate?
Guess who approved a merger between Live Nation and Ticketmaster in 2010?
Wow.
It wasn't us. It was the DOJ. And to prove a violation, there are a couple different potential violations of antitrust laws. And to prove it, DOJ is going to have to argue that, hey, even though we approved this back in 2010, we think there are monopoly problems today. Ticketmaster could argue the defense of what's called latches. It's basically you snoozeth, you loseth. It's a legal term. You know, if DOJ didn't get involved some time ago, then they've lost their right to complain about this being a monopoly. But, you know, America's a funny place. We encourage through capitalism, go out there, start a business, and if you work really hard, you can take over the industry. But wait, you can't get too successful. Then if you do and you occupy the industry completely, you're a monopoly. And under other sections, courts have said, hey, if you occupy 50% of the industry, that's monopolistic. Ticketmaster occupies about 70% of the industry. Wow. So it's a good chance a court might conclude that they are a monopoly.
But competition is good for consumers. I mean, when you buy a ticket, you see all of those different fees and you think, well, do I have any other options?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what happens when something takes over an industry. There's zero competition. I mean, you know, try to call a government agency, see what the customer service you get is compared to a private company. That's because when the government occupies a field, it has a monopoly. They're allowed to have a monopoly. Private companies are not permitted to have a monopoly. And that is the challenge, is each case is different. How do they decide, hey, this is a monopoly and this isn't?
I feel like Taylor Swift's next album is going to be called Monopoly, by the way. All right, so
what happened to Whitesnake?
Let's talk about
that's my music.
Let's talk about what lawmakers can do. Senator Klobuchar spoke yesterday about Ticketmaster ahead of the hearing. Let's hear what she had to say and speak on the other side.
I need to make antitrust sexy again. I need to make industry consolidation and unfair practices, discriminatory conduct. That all sounds really boring, but it sounds a lot more interesting when a Taylor Swift fan is putting it to music.
So, Allie, very quickly here, is there bipartisan support for more comprehensive antitrust laws?
Look, we'll see. You're seeing Senator Amy Klobuchar there, who's an expert in this space. This is a bipartisanly co-sponsored hearing with Senator Mike Lee, so it's bipartisan from that perspective. There is a push right now against things like big tech in the conservative space, as well as from the Democratic side. So you could see some movement on this. I think where there's probably room for some negotiation is when it comes to ticket price transparency. That's something that Ticketmaster's CEO is likely to talk about during their opening statements, something that we could see lawmakers seize on in the coming weeks. But again, this is sort of the opening salvo to if we end up seeing any action on this.
So, Danny, Live Nation is the parent company for Ticketmaster. Here's what they said in a statement. The president said that bots tend to contribute to, quote, an awful consumer experience. So what are these bots here, and are we going to hear about them today?
Yeah, Ticketmaster's argument here is essentially, hey, we have this monopoly, and there are other people who are exploiting that monopoly. That's not much of a defense, but essentially these are systems that get all the tickets first and then resell them at higher prices in what's called the secondary market. But guess what? Ticketmaster also occupies the secondary market as well. There are a few companies that have been able to do that, occupy both the primary market, where you make that initial sale, and then the secondary market, where you resell something.
So they're not the bots, but essentially they have the platform for the bots.
Right. They created the platform. They created the system. And of course, in any monopoly, when demand is high and price is whatever the company wants it to be, of course, scalpers are going to turn around and sell it for more. In essence, in my view, the company is creating the problem of the bots.
Wow. All right, Danny Savalas, Ali Vitale, obviously a lot of interest here. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more. Thank you.
A former high-level FBI official is accused of aiding a Russian oligarch. New York prosecutors allege that Charles McGonigal worked secretly with the oligarch to investigate a Russian rival. He's also accused of taking $225,000 in cash from a former intelligence officer while on the job. McGonigal has pleaded not guilty to all charges. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us with more. So, Ken, tell us more about Charles McGonigal, the man at the center of these allegations. Who is he, and what was his position in the FBI?
Good morning, Joe. Charles McGonigal was a prominent member of the FBI for 2 decades, and he rose to some very high positions, including the one relevant here, the head of the FBI's counterintelligence division in New York City. So in that job, he was really in charge, in part, with protecting the United States from malign foreign influence. And these 2 cases charge him essentially with trying to profit from foreign influence. First, while he was there in the FBI, the D.C. indictment says he took $225,000 from an Albanian businessman who was a former member of that country's intelligence service and went on trips abroad and helped that person do business, all without disclosing any of it to the FBI. And prosecutors say that was an illegal conflict of interest. And then secondly, in the New York case, he is accused of trying to help a Russian oligarch, Oleg Deripaska, who's got close ties to Vladimir Putin and has been indicted already for violating sanctions. He's accused of trying to help that person violate sanctions, taking a lot of money to do so. So this is a real black eye for the FBI, Joe.
We saw some images there of McGonigal and his attorney. It looks like speaking with the media. Has there been any response from him and his attorneys to these charges?
McGonigal actually pleaded not guilty yesterday, was released on $500,000 bond. His lawyer said they look forward to reviewing the evidence, and they plan to fight this in court, Joe.
So what happens to McGonigal now moving forward here?
Look, he's free, and he's going to try to fight the charges. But look, this has been an absolutely impactful case across the FBI. The director, Christopher Wray, sent an internal email to employees saying this does not reflect the conduct that he sees every day. And he sent a public statement out saying, look, this shows that we will go after people who break the law, even including those who work for the FBI, Joe.
All right, Ken Delanian, thank you so much.
You bet.
This morning, Ukraine's government is in the midst of a purge. Several senior officials, including the deputy defense minister, have resigned amid sweeping corruption allegations. The government shakeup comes as Kyiv awaits a decision by Germany on whether it will allow Poland to export its Leopard tanks. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now for more on this. So, Richard, first, who are some of these figures stepping down and why?
So what we're seeing here is the Ukrainian government cleaning house. And this is a move that was announced directly by President Zelensky, with 5 regional governors and 4 deputy ministers all facing allegations of corruption, often embezzlement of money, contracting scandals, money that should have been used to help the war effort or to supply the war effort, allegedly being stolen or misappropriated. So this is an attempt by Zelensky to assure the Ukrainian people that money and efforts that are supposed to go to the war are going to the war, and also to reassure the international community that the money that is sent to Ukraine and the weapons that are being sent to Ukraine are being well used. So this is something that has already been positively received by the Ukrainian people. This has happened a few times in the past, but there has been this desire from many Ukrainians I've spoken to for Zelensky to look in his inner circle, clean house, and instead of just keep asking for more and more support, weapons and funding. So I think this could potentially help his case as he's looking for Germany to send more weapons.
And what is the latest with that and Germany sending those Leopard 2 tanks?
So, as you know, Ukraine is entirely dependent on foreign aid, foreign weapons to fight off the Russian invasion. And there are German tanks, Leopard tanks, that Germany has said it will not supply. But Poland also has German tanks, Leopard tanks, and Poland says it's very happy to give them to Ukraine. But you can't transfer another country's weapons to a third country. That's not part of weapons deals. If the United States sells weapons to Israel or Egypt, to name an example, those countries can't then decide that they're going to sell the American F-16s on to a third country because they feel like it. The weapons transactions are done transactionally from the supplier to the customer, and that's the way it's supposed to end. So if they are transferred on, they need the approval of the supplying nation. And Germany says that it has now received a formal request from Poland to allow Poland to transfer its German-made Leopard tanks to Ukraine, and Germany says that it will address it with due urgency, according to a German official quoted by the German news agency. So this does seem to be on the road toward progress. The Germans have said in the past that they don't object in principle to Poland transferring German-made tanks to Ukraine. And then with this new announcement, it seems like it is just a bureaucratic procedure that is holding it up. After Germany came under enormous public pressure from the United States and other countries to do this deal. Germany was named, shamed, and outed. And now you see the Ukrainians cleaning house to eliminate any possible excuse that Germany or other countries might find to not give Ukraine weapons. They're saying, look, you have reservations about giving us weapons. We're cleaning house. We're making sure that these weapons are received with the most responsible hands.
Richard, before we let you go, we are approaching the one-year anniversary of the war. Where do things stand on the battlefield?
So it depends how far back you go. But first of all, most Ukrainians, not necessarily if you ask them on their will, but they know it. They know that this was a fight that they could not have won without the international community. Russia is a bigger country. It has a bigger army. It has a bigger population. They know that they fought tremendously bravely. They fought hard, but they recognize that they need outside support. That's why I was saying it's a difficult pill to swallow, but I think 1 year on, the Ukrainians recognize they need this international lifeline. Without it, they could lose this war over time. The Ukrainians have been tremendously brave in their resistance, and they want to keep going, and they believe that they have the Russians on the back foot in some places. But they also now are looking at what is potentially a very, very long conflict, and they're worried that the international community, particularly Western Europe, is losing interest in the war. And that's why these, what seem like minor disputes over weapons are so big, because Ukraine is concerned about the principle that if Germany stops giving weapons or stops allowing other countries to give away German weapons, that it's a sign that over time support could erode, and the Ukrainians know they're dependent on it.
Richard Engel, thank you.
Welcome back. COVID vaccinations may soon become part of your yearly vaccine routine as the FDA announces a new proposal for an annual COVID shot.
In a brief published yesterday, the health agency said each year they would select the most up-to-date COVID vaccine to be rolled out, allowing most children and adults to get the shot once a year. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us now to discuss. So, doctor, none of this booster. I mean, it sounds like what we're currently doing with the flu shot, a new one each year. What's behind this move? And if approved, when will this roll out?
Yeah, Lindsay, it's a really interesting discussion that we've been waiting for. This signals a shift to trying to make this a bit more predictable. That is COVID and how often you need to get vaccinated. And really, the FDA's voting question at hand is, can we also just get rid of the older versions of the vaccines, that primary series, 2 shots, 3 to 4 weeks apart, then you can get your updated booster, and just replace all the shots that are available with that updated booster. And then moving forward, that might be an annual phenomenon. I think there's still a lot of questions, though, and we'll expect hopefully some of that to be discussed Thursday.
Yeah, speaking of questions, Dr. Patel, I mean, we know officials have been warning about the rise in this new Kraken COVID variant. It's early right now to really know how effective this latest booster is against that variant. But just overall, do we know how well these annual shots could protect against new strains as they come out?
Yeah, that is literally, Joe, kind of a super trillion-dollar Kraken question in and of itself, because that's asking how predictable would the variants be in and of themselves. The variant that we have circulating right now, that XBB 1.5 variant, looks wildly different from that Wuhan strain or the strains that we saw in January of 2020. So for that reason, I think that we can hope that no matter what, they will hold and have some effectiveness that gives us at least that protection against hospitalization and death. And even with that, Joe, we do know that people will still unfortunately die and be hospitalized, especially older and immunocompromised people, which is why I think the agency is going to talk about recommending potentially 2 shots for certain vulnerable populations, maybe also including children. So I think there's still a lot there, but it is one more sign, and a good one in 2023, that we're starting to try to move into that endemic phase where COVID kind of becomes, even though it's a little more lethal, part of the other annual flu and other viruses and vaccines that we get.
Okay, Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you.
Time now for our weekly mental health check-in. Today we're taking a closer look at how a friendly conversation can make a world of difference when it comes to your day-to-day mood.
Plus, we're going to be shedding some light on work burnout and how it can take a toll on your mental, even physical well-being.
Let's bring in Nero Feliciano for more on these headlines. She's a psychotherapist and author. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. So let's start off with that friendly conversation. We can have a friendly conversation here about opening up on our thoughts and feelings, how it's ultimately beneficial to our mental health. So explain exactly what we're talking about here and why.
Well, generally when we meet someone and we're asked, how are you? It's a very pre-programmed response. I'm fine. But it's superficial. We don't get to how we really are feeling. And our longest study on well-being coming out of Harvard tells us it's these genuine connections that is at the heart of enhancing our well-being, our longevity, the strength of our emotional connections. And in order to do that, we have to be vulnerable. So actually expressing to someone who you trust, who you know is empathetic, how you're really doing can help decrease stress, increase that connection, and at the end of it, really boost our immunity even.
I remember years ago I did a story about this class called Touchy Feely. It was called at Stanford Business School, and it was about to be good at business, you have to access your emotions, and how just a simple change can be, instead of asking people, how are you, asking, how are you feeling? Because it may elicit a response that gets more into how you're actually feeling and get down that road.
Yeah, and a little less like robotic, like Nero was just talking about. So Yale University also has updated their mental health policies. There was actually a lawsuit filed against the university for allegedly discriminating against students with mental health disabilities. How will the school's new policies help those who suffer with their mental health?
This is really pivotal because prior to the change in policy, it almost was as if they were sending the message that if you have a mental illness, you don't belong here. Students were actually forced to withdraw often when their symptoms of mental illness were severe. Now they're very supportive, which is so important for these students who are going through significant stress. They're eligible to take more leave. They can have insurance coverage. They're able to utilize resources while on campus, such as the library. In addition to that, they make it easier for kids to come back. Kids do not have to pass every course when they're returning to school, and they also don't have to use their time constructively, as they said before. So now students are more apt to seek mental health and disclose mental health symptoms and get the support they need to continue their education there.
And finally, Nero, let's talk about work burnout. In 2019, the World Health Organization acknowledged burnout can have major effects on one's mental health, that it's closely linked to depression. Talk to us more about that, what employers can do to really help their staff cope with tough times.
When employers, same as we were talking about connection, they can be in touch with what their staff is going through and create policies that promote healthy boundaries, healthy work-life balance. But one distinction between burnout and depression is with burnout, it's specific to a certain area of life. We usually see it in work. It can be extended to caregiving. We saw it during parenting, during the pandemic. And if we step away from those situations and take a break, burnout tends to get better, whereas depression is more global. Although the symptoms can be the same: lack of concentration, irritability, lack of motivation to do whatever the task is at hand. But the nice thing about burnout is it is easier to treat if that person can take that break and restore and do the things to help them to feel better.
So important to do that whenever we can. Narelle Feliciano, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Welcome back. After months of Netflix teasing its crackdown on passwords, it's finally happening, and soon.
NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa breaks down who's affected and what you need to know.
Hey there. Well, if you're among the 100 million plus people leaning on your great aunt, maybe a cousin or a friend of a friend to gain access to Netflix, prepare for the pause button. Netflix's terms have long said use is limited to a household, and soon the streaming giant will actually start making sure that's the case. An unprecedented move for the industry.
Whether you're binge watching Wednesday,
I think I'm going to love it here,
or catching up on The Crown,
as future king, I have a duty.
Your Netflix favorites will soon cost you more than your friends' or parents' password. Streaming giant Netflix just revealing its crackdown on password sharing is imminent and could press pause on an estimated 100+ million viewers who are tuning in without paying up. The new practice, to begin rolling out by the end of March, will be similar to recent test runs in Latin American countries, where viewers outside of the primary household had to create a sub-account to tune in for an additional $2 to $3 a month, compared to the standard $15.49. Netflix hasn't said what the price tag will be in the U.S.
There will be current members that are unhappy with this move. We'll see folks come on as new subscribers, essentially borrowers creating their accounts, or incremental monetizations.
News of a password-sharing crackdown broke last spring after Netflix lost subscribers for the first time in more than a decade. It's a stark turnaround from a few years ago when the streaming giant seemingly encouraged users to share their accounts.
Y'all remember when Netflix said love is sharing a password back in 2017?
Why now? It's about getting subscriber growth back on track for the company. Netflix held off as long as they could before they ultimately had to do that.
Amid cooling demand and an increasingly competitive industry, more streamers have raised prices in recent months. And while Netflix is the first to break the barrier on password sharing, experts say it likely won't be the last.
I think everyone will take a page out of Netflix's book. A lot of Americans are tightening their belts.
In the meantime, experts say check who is utilizing your Netflix account under the Manage Access tab. You can log out specific devices. And if you're looking for ways to save, consider a cheaper ad-supported subscription that many streamers offer, and search for deals connected to credit cards and phone plans, as big changes set in for the binge-watching business.
So how exactly will Netflix know if you're password sharing? Experts say it's complicated. We know Netflix looks at things like IP addresses and account activity. The streaming giant assures people will still be able to use their account when traveling and if you live in between homes, emphasizing the crackdown is on people who persistently abuse password sharing. But more details to come. Back to you.
All right, Emily Aketa, thank you.
More financial headlines now. A second antitrust suit might be on the horizon for Google's parent company, Alphabet.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Joe, Lindsay, good morning to you. That's right. So the Justice Department is preparing to sue Google's parent company, Alphabet, as soon as today over its dominance in the online ad market. The move has been rumored for months after the agency reportedly rejected concessions from Google last summer. Google is the market leader, earning more than a quarter of U.S. digital ad revenue. In 2020, the Justice Department sued Google for allegedly abusing its monopoly in web search. That trial is scheduled to begin this fall. Amazon is pushing further into healthcare, launching a monthly subscription plan for Prime members that will cover a range of generic drugs. The program, called RX Pass, includes more than 50 medications addressing more than 80 conditions, such as high blood pressure, anxiety, diabetes, and male pattern baldness. Now, the service costs $5 a month and would be without insurance and on top of the annual fee for Prime. Customers enrolled in Medicare, Medicaid, or other government health programs are not eligible, and Amazon says the average Prime member will save about $100 a year. And M&M's is ditching its spokes candy characters in favor of comedian Maya Rudolph following backlash from right-wing commentators over their new look. M&M's maker Mars saying the characters will take an indefinite pause and Rudolph will star in this year's Super Bowl ad. The spokes candies have represented the brand in commercials and other marketing materials since 1960. Last year, they were rebranded with a new backstory, clothing, and personality to be more inclusive, guys.
Well, I do like Maya Rudolph, so
Yeah,
there's
I
that.
love her.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Silvana, thanks. Welcome back, everybody. Disney World's Splash Mountain ride closed down yesterday after more than 30 years. Some fans, they're already seeing the opportunity for a side hustle. They decided to try and sell the water from the Orlando attraction. Several offers appear on eBay, one being a 4-ounce bag retailing for $300.75. The posting shows a decorated plastic bag with the words Splash Mountain Water and the date written in permanent marker. I guess you have to trust them.
Yeah.
So the other sellers, they're priced at like hundreds of dollars each. Of course, you guys will remember the ride. It was originally themed around Disney's highly criticized 1940s movie Song of the South. Well, the ride is getting made over. When it reopens, it will be based on the 2009 movie The Princess and the Frog. But I guess in the meantime, you can
Get some of that
ride
crystal
water.
clear, filtered Splash Mountain water.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. All right. All right. Well, maybe you can travel there or maybe someplace else. Well, much of the country is still feeling the chill of winter. Summer travel season's around the corner, which means looking for deals on the internet on flights. So Scott Keyes, who is the founder and chief flight expert of Going, formerly known as Scott's Cheap Flights, joins us now with predictions for the upcoming travel year. All right. So we all remember last summer, lots of cancellations, chaos with the airlines. Do we think this year will be different? What can we expect this year?
Yeah, not just last summer, just last month as well. But I think the good news is that aside from those blowups that happened early summer and in December with Southwest, air travel disruptions have actually been pretty good. The most recent U.S. data for the month of October showed that the number of cancellations actually half of the normal rate, the number of delays down about 25–30%. I think as air travel starts to renormalize, as it is now with a lot of that pent-up demand finally starting to dissipate, you're going to see fewer and fewer of these sort of airline meltdowns that really kind of characterize 2022. I'm hopeful that the airlines are going to improve on this. They'd better.
Yeah,
it was a pretty bad 2022.
Let's talk about prices. I was daydreaming the other day, and I was looking up some, and apparently I want to go where everybody else wants to go because it was not cheap. What do we think about prices?
Yeah, look, airfare in last spring and summer saw some record spikes. I mean, up 19% one month, a new record. But the funny thing that's been happening in the past 7 months, 6 of those months, airfare actually fell. It has gotten significantly cheaper since last June. It's basically on par with where we were in February 2020. And you are starting to see some of those amazing deals pop up once again. Already in 2023, we've seen fares like nonstop to Barcelona for $241 round trip, nonstop to Tahiti for $499 round trip. Those types of really like eye-popping fares are coming back once again.
Were those on your list, Barcelona and Tahiti?
I wouldn't mind either.
Besides those, I mean, what are some of the hottest destinations it's looking like?
Absolutely. So if you're hoping to go to Europe, where you're seeing the cheapest flights now are to places like Portugal and Ireland. Both, and you're seeing regularly fares nonstop in the mid-300s, $362 round trip on full-service airlines. If you're hoping to go west, Hawaii, again, one of those places that we saw New York to Hawaii just a few weeks ago for $333 round trip. And good news for folks who are hoping to go to Japan. Open for tourism again as of October. You're starting to see some of those cheap flights coming back. We saw flights from the West Coast over to Tokyo for $316 round trip last month. Fingers crossed that those fares keep coming in 2023.
What's top of your list? Where do you want to go this year?
Oh boy, so I'm heading down to Sacramento next weekend. Not necessarily the top of many people's list, but I'm going with my 4-year-old daughter and cannot wait.
I love that. Good for you guys. Have so much fun. Scott Keyes, thank you so much.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.